This video has been automatically generated from an article written by Martin Freiland, that's me, on martinfreiland.com. The theory of the plasma dome simulation described here is based on the premise that Earth was once ripped from its original plasma cell, in which Saturn formed the central sun, by a passing, what I call, exosome-reaction planet. A planet that, in the time of Noah, ripped apart Saturn's plasma cell and scorched Earth's surface via electromagnetic plasma discharge. In this process, with plasma lightning bolts streaking across the Earth's surface, the rock in some areas melted completely, while other parts remained untouched or were partially affected, as seen in areas like Petra in Jordan or the Grand Canyon in the U.S. The theory, launched here in 2022, and described in book format since 2023, suggests that the original Earth has been sort of dragged into the trash can or liver of the original universe, and that the central sun, Saturn, has therefore disappeared. The process of starting up plasma domes was then initiated on that original scorched Earth. These plasma domes, actually plasma spheres, with one half located below the surface of that original Earth, and the other half above. Hence I refer to it as a dome, being a half-sphere, serve as the screen within which a simulation is played out. It is like a computer game on a 3D plasma screen, with the blueprint of the simulation dating back to the time of Noah, who made a backup approximately 200 years ago. I also explain why there are 176 of those plasma domes, and how an attempt is made to regain the creation code through self-fertilization simulation, represented by the X moment, where 88 XX plasma domes must form the egg cell by being merged under one larger one, and 88 XY plasma domes must form the sperm cell by being merged under one larger one. I recently explained the crossing moment, the X moment, in the article about the Notre Dame, Maria, the womb of Maria to be precise. However, for a better understanding, it is useful to read the book Messiah Trump. During the creation of the egg cell and the sperm cell, the initiation of two large plasma domes, being plasma spheres, each respectively forming the egg cell and the sperm cell. Plasma effects occur that have everything to do with colorful northern lights, and everything to do with the reflections of the 87 other plasma domes, seen from ours, which appear as round disks circling through the air and, upon completion of the plasma spheres, come to a standstill, then suddenly disappear. To explain these phenomena, the upcoming alien invasion PSYOP cover-up story is necessary. When those two plasma spheres are initiated, and the sun plasma effect within the smaller plasma domes disappears, because their plasma dome is disabled, 3 days of darkness and the disappearance of the starry sky and the moon occur. The crossing moment occurs during the phoenix phenomenon, where the egg cell and the sperm cell are merged. The plasma effect that occurs looks like a fiery bird, flapping its wings and growing from the bottom up to the peak. This is because the superdome builds up a spinning electromagnetic field, as is the case for any plasma ball or plasma dome, and the plasma circulates until the ball is filled and the plasma becomes static. Without going into too much detail right now, because I explained that in the book, this phoenix moment is one of the 3 escape moments for consciousness that does not step into the light tunnel trap, where consciousness can return to the original. And there, the logical question could arise for you, which I actually implicitly answer in the book, but it is useful to repeat it, because it remains a difficult issue to grasp. What question? The question, how can you return to the original if the original Earth was just removed by that exosome planet and the Saturn plasma cell was torn apart? Understanding the answer to that question requires a few steps. First, it is necessary to understand that consciousness is who you truly are. Then it is important to know that the materialized perception of the original Earth actually also represented matter formed from code. You can best compare that to how the human body forms. How can a complete human develop from one initial cell that keeps dividing, and with such a structure being built in a way that eventually all body parts, organs, brains, etc., are combined into a beautifully functional body? And how does the body heal from an injury? All the information on how it forms or heals is in the stem cell code. Let us call the primary materialized perception from code the first and original reality, the original universe, if you will. That original universe is nothing more than the result of that intangible element, that unobservable and intangible element called consciousness. Consciousness is, as it were, the creator or instigator of the concept of matter. It wanted to, as it were, mold itself into form. It wanted to make itself tangible. It wanted to split itself from unity, consciousness, into individual consciousness, with a task and purpose. It wanted to create a material version of itself. If we were to call that unity consciousness God, no one would be surprised. There are billions of people who believe in a creative God. However, if I were to suggest that consciousness is a part of God, of the singular original consciousness, that may be new, but not much crazier than the religious concept of God. If we compare consciousness to stem cell code that is able to materialize, it may become somewhat more tangible. So if the original all-encompassing stem cell code, the original singular consciousness, would have all possibilities within itself, it could decide to split into individual consciousness, where the split does not lead to complete separation, but the whole remains intact. Yet the individual consciousness is given a creative, materializing task. Let us say it is a neural network of consciousness, where each neuron has its task, but together they form a complete brain. It is like the first Bitcoin node that contained the source code and the subsequent nodes that each contain that same source code, with added new and approved by all other nodes, creative tasks. In that original consciousness, the plan or need for a material world arose, the need for tangibility, for matter. You could call it the creation plan. That original consciousness, in my theory, has built in a strict rule for this creation exercise. A failure protection mechanism that cleans up and destroys what starts to behave egocentrically, that strives for sole rulership or separation. Let us say the failure protection mechanism holds things together so that all creation elements continue to serve the greater whole, but expels, cleans up like an exosome reaction that cleans up pollution from the human body, and destroys what starts to become malignant. It gets rid of that individual consciousness that tends to become malignant and threatens to separate from the whole of stem cell code and creative power or materialization power. In my book, I explain how Lucifer, the little beast must have a name, at the time of Noah knew that this failure security mechanism would be activated. Lucifer, not yet stripped of the stem cell code, creative power, behaved egocentrically and devised a plan to create his own universe, wanting to be God himself, wanting to be the boss. However, he also knew that this plan would not serve the greater whole, the singular consciousness, and that he would activate the failure security mechanism. But he thought, if I realize a backup of a time span of code, I can probably realize new plasma cells on the surface of the original Earth, removed via an exosome reaction, and thus ultimately regain the stem cell code, by deceiving another consciousness and making it believe that the simulation is still the original reality. In fact, Lucifer deceived the other consciousness, which is now perceiving his simulation, by portraying a kind of spiritual transition to the fifth dimension, as is currently happening in the spiritual movement towards the fifth dimension. Let us leave aside for now how exactly he managed to do this, as this story would then become too long. In one of my books, I explain how Bitcoin played an important role in this, already in the time of Noah. Bitcoin Noah's Ark. Lucifer needed our consciousness for his plan to regain the stem cell code. This has everything to do with the 2 times 88 plasmadomes that must form the egg cell and the sperm cell, and has everything to do with the phoenix egg and the Maria womb. Notre Dame. The sinister plan was to regain creative power through a self-fertilization simulation, bringing together the egg cell and the sperm cell. However, that plan does not seem to have been particularly successful, because Lucifer overlooked one thing, namely the fact that in us, consciousness, a piece of individual consciousness as part of the singular original consciousness, that failure security mechanism still resides. And moreover, he can never complete the code to recreate a completely new universe. The code is forked, like Bitcoin Cash once forked from Bitcoin. The well-known biblical Psalm 23 is also a lament by King David, who reincarnates in every simulation round within the 200-year simulation cycles, and is represented by Donald Trump in this round, by David, who is trying not to give up, David, who is a kind of, and from your Hela Hola, keep up the courage singing a song, David, who endlessly goes around in the house of the Lord, Lucifer's simulation. And the problem is there is no other option. The simulation is all they have got. Regaining the creation code appears to be impossible, and the more consciousness escapes each round, returns to the original, the more desperate the plan becomes. Lucifer and his creation power-deprived consciousness companions, represented by the avatars in the simulation that we know from certain bloodlines, have no other option. The return is cut off. The database is forked. Okay, clear. Now the question is how we can return to the original. If that original Earth has been removed from the original via the exosome reaction, via that exosome planet, would not that mean that we would end up on that original atmosphere-free Earth? You might think. And there it takes a necessary leap back to who we actually are. We are consciousness perceiving the materialized version of code. Lucifer has shifted our perception to his materialized, copied version of code. But here comes the most important part. Consciousness is part of the original creation source code, the stem cell code of everything that is original. It has the capacity to restore what has been wounded and to recreate what has been lost. It still carries the full Bitcoin creation database within it. But, you might think now, but then the consciousness that is needed to create a new Earth is no longer complete. That rule only applies to Lucifer here within this copied simulation. He cannot access the complete code of the stem cell code. Let us call it the God code. He cannot access the entirety of the stem cell code. He is forked. It was his illusion and his sinister rescue plan in the time of Noah, but that plan failed. He is stuck. We, consciousness, can return to the original, and from that original consciousness, which carries all possibilities within itself, and can redistribute itself unlimitedly in individual creation tasks. Everything that has been destroyed or removed can be restored instantly. This means that we can instantly perceive the materialized version of the recoded and rematerialized Earth. The only problem is that Lucifer knows this escape possibility and will try to tempt us again to stay in the simulation cycle by showing us a kind of plasma tunnel, the light tunnel, that seems to lead us to the original, or to the fifth dimension for those who believe in it, or to heaven for those who believe in it. All we have to do is reject that invitation. The return to the original does not happen based on invitation. The return to the original happens based on knowing that you do not need to be invited, but that you are already part of the highest divine authority, the original consciousness. Return to the original happens based on rejecting every offer, and the simple decision, I return to the original. Okay, that was it again. Share and like this video, and see you next time.